Hello, welcome to MJRRPG. The following is a review of Orpheus Station, the first scenario in Dark Space, a system-neutral collection of Lovecraftian SF horror published by Kabuki Kaiser. As always, the first chunk of this review is largely spoiler-light for players and GMs, while the second part is completely packed full of spoilers, so I'll warn off any players beforehand. You can also find the text version of this review in the link in the description. In short, Orpheus Station is an appropriately spooky romp through an abandoned space station, with enough changes of pace, twists, and decisions to make for a well-paced 3 to 4 hour session. Dark Space is a system-agnostic scenario collection, though it works best with systems involving some sort of sanity mechanic, and more specifically Cthulhu mythos-themed systems. I ran Orpheus Station using Darkship, a hack of Cthulhu Dark and Mothership, as that's the system Kabuki Kaiser used for playtesting. I'm not entirely sold on the system hack, and for following scenarios I've used regular Cthulhu Dark to a better effect in my opinion, but Orpheus Station itself is a very nice start to the collection. Dark Space is loose on details and heavy on mood. The setting is only hinted at throughout the various scenario text, mostly in character backgrounds and read-out-loud introduction pieces. We don't even find out what year the setting is until the fourth scenario. The game text is similarly vague, mostly due to being system agnostic, but also as a definite stylistic choice. That will work very well for some GMs and not as well for others. Anytime a roll would be asked for, the text is written in italics, and anytime a sanity type event occurs, the text is in bold red. Besides that, there are no mechanics baked into the text. This makes using Cthulhu Dark extremely easy and well suited, while more mechanically crunchy systems like Call of Cthulhu or Mothership would need some extra preparation work. Orpheus Station is a relatively straightforward scenario, working with a bunch of tropes to set the stage for the rest of the collection. The player characters, crew members of the trading ship Woolian 9, and employed by the not-at-all sinister megacorp Vanguard, all caps, are tasked with exploring a space station orbiting Pluto that suddenly cut off all contact with the wider system. Crew of Misfits? Check. Shadowy megacorp? Check. Spooky ghost station? Check. All boxes checked for a classic space horror. The scenario starts off pretty much how you would expect, but enough wrenches are thrown into the mix to make for a unique session. There are some awkward bits that a GM might want to think through beforehand, but nothing that gets in the way of a smooth run. There's some more suggestions in the spoiler section. If that sounds interesting already, Dark Space is available digitally and through print on demand on DriveThruRPG. The following section is full of spoilers, so if you're not a GM, I would suggest stopping here, unless you just don't care. Orpheus Station, as written, is fairly straightforward, though it can open up quite a bit depending on how much freedom you give the players to act outside the bounds of the scenario text. This is something of a reoccurring theme in the Dark Space scenarios. As the setting is quite far future science fiction, players could have access to all manner of tools they might want, allowing for plenty of ideas, from the very practical to the stereotypical harebrained RPG plans, that are not accounted for in the compact scenario text. This isn't necessarily a point against the scenario, just a GM preference. If the GM is aiming for a short and linear session, they can follow the text to restrict actions, but if they want a much more free-form, improvisational, and potentially longer session, they can let the players go off on tangents and make up details on the fly. The investigator ship, the Woolian 9, is instructed by their spooky megacorp employer, Vanguard, to investigate Orpheus Station orbiting Pluto, which has gone silent. The reason it's silent is because it's empty, its occupants all horribly reduced to dust by the color out of space, discovered by Vanguard scientists on Neeks, and taken to the station. The investigators, of course, don't know this. Vanguard doesn't clue them in, and so they wander around the station trying to find out what happened. Along the way, they get chased by a giant monitor lizard infected by the color out of space, as is wont to happen. They eventually find out what happened at the station and escape the colorful lizard back to the ship. From there, the scenario opens up into either a simple branching path, or much wider, depending on how much freedom the GM gives the players. As written, Vanguard takes complete control of the Woolian 9 and sends it towards Neeks, demanding the investigators get another sample of the color. Alternatively, the investigators could try to capture the lizard in place of going to Neeks. Either way, any surviving investigators that have some form of color sample will then find the Woolian 9 locked into course for Earth, leaving the last moral dilemma of allowing the ship to complete its trip, dumping the cargo into space, or abandoning the Woolian 9. Or, if the GM is more open to improvisation, they could let the investigators disable the autopilot. From there, they could do just about anything. The scenario writing is generally vague, which well suits Cthulhu Dark or similar rules-light systems. There is no map at the station, and no suggestions for combating any Mythos threats. The writing is generally to the point, along with some nicely atmospheric read-aloud text. Dark space scenarios overall have fun read-aloud sections, mostly staying under a paragraph so as not to space out players too much, but with lots of appropriately vague but colorful Lovecraftian language to set the mood. The one main issue I had with Orpheus Station is that, as the first scenario in the collection, it immediately sets the players at odds with Vanguard, which still sends them on missions afterwards. After taking control of their ship and almost, or successfully, getting some of them killed, players could understandably roleplay their characters as not wanting to have anything to do with Vanguard afterwards. A simple solution would be, if playing Dark Space as a campaign, to move Orpheus Station to a later point in the series. A slightly more detailed option would be to make Vanguard, or at least a subsection of Vanguard, more like a Delta Green type of organization, rather than a pretty clearly evil Weyland-Yutani type of company. Overall, Orpheus Station is still a strong start to Dark Space, and a perfectly serviceable as a standalone scenario. Again, Dark Space is available digitally and through print on demand on DriveThruRPG. Thank you for listening. As always, credit to Cryochamber for each of their album Cthulhu. Until next time, have a good one.